This is Jim Fox from the LA Kings, and you're watching Home Ice Advantage, all hockey talk with Ted Sobel and Jonathan Davis.
Thank you, James. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Home Ice Advantage. It's, again, a Stanley Cup playoffs version. And not only is John here today, but Jesse Cohen from the LA Kings is here. And Jess, thanks for getting all dressed up for us.
Yeah, my pleasure. When was that recorded?
Several hundred years ago, just a few weeks ago.
Right. Sounded like it was inside a hockey rink.
No, it was actually inside the dining room.
Oh,
yeah, it was just a real quick thing. It's the least you could do. Jim was going to actually. I invited him to come on the show today, and he's too busy doing all kinds of stuff.
Sure. So you got me. I get it.
You're the second best. We do. You get what you get. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anyway, tell everybody what you do there with the Kings.
I host Kings Talk, the post-game radio show, and All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings.
Outstanding. And how many years you been doing it?
Oh, in some form or another, I have been doing it since 2007, but in any kind of official capacity, I've been doing it since 2014, I guess, fall of 2014-15 season.
Okay.
And I'm not here to blow smoke up Jesse's ass, because you know that I would never blow smoke up his ass.
But
the post-game show that Jesse does is a great listen.
Oh, thank you.
It really is. I don't get the opportunity to listen to it a lot, but on a recent drive home, I told Jesse this, so this is not something that that is new.
Yeah, she didn't believe it the first time either, though. But go ahead.
But no, it's very engaging. Jesse does a great job between his knowledge of the history of the team and his disposition and how he handles the callers. It's a great listen.
Well, for those, if I may, for those who don't know, and I imagine most people do at this point, I grew up a Kings fan. I went to games with my dad. We were season ticket members. So yeah, when John references my knowledge of the club, it's
right.
I'm not just a dispassionate observer. I'm a lunatic who cares entirely too much about the welfare of the LA Kings.
Right. Okay, so before we go on and talk about the current Kings, there's a very important subject we need to bring up.
Sure.
And that is a happy birthday wishes to Eddie the Jet Joyal.
Oh, okay.
He's 85 years old today, guys.
Oh, wow. All right.
Okay. And John, I don't know why I put that up. That's a total mistake here. Hold on a second. There's Eddie the Jet. He's the second one in this picture from the front. Okay, that's the original. He's an original LA King. And the first game I ever attended, which was Game 7 of the expansion season playoffs against those Minnesota North Stars, Jesse's favorite team, Eddie the Jet scored the first power play goal I ever saw. So there he is.
I'm a little upset at how close in age my mom and Eddie Joyal are. If you had asked me earlier today to guess the window, I would not have guessed it was that close.
Really, 85. Yeah. Well, I'm getting too close myself.
Yeah.
Anyways,
the best of us.
There's the box score from the first game I ever went to, 9-4. Kings were down, I think, 8-2 or something after two periods, something ridiculous. So that was Game 7, by the way. Nice finish.
That's a hockey reference box score, by the way.
Yes, it is. Very good. Very good.
Just wanted to point out that
yes. And if you look very close, the first power play goal I ever saw, it was because Eddie the Jet was in the penalty box. So anyway, just a little fun reference on his 85th birthday. Happy birthday,
Eddie the Jet.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Now we can talk about the current Kings and their situation. Your thoughts, Jess, before we move on. We're going to get some sound here. We're going to hear from the coach and the GM and a couple of the players.
The loss to Edmonton was particularly difficult, not just because of the expectations that were raised going into the series, but also the way the series played out. Obviously, the players, the coach, the front office staff, everybody's talked about it. But John mentioned that I do a good job on Kings Talk, and thank you, John. But I have to say, I don't know how entertaining episode 6 was after Game 6, because I was not in a very good mood. For those who don't know, I was diagnosed with cancer recently, and I was not feeling particularly great the day of Game 6. But I thought, you know what? It's an elimination game situation. If they win, I want to be there to talk about it, and if they lose, I kind of have to be there to. I mean, I don't have to. They would understand.
Or you,
but
for example, like when things go wrong, they really go wrong.
Yeah, and if it went wrong, it was like, well, this is going to be my last chance to do this and to talk to people, so I feel like I should be there. And
of course,
I was impressed. So I guess my real takeaway from the playoffs is I was really impressed with the performance of the fans in the building and the Kings fans in general. I thought it was really, really impressive. And stick taps, which is a phrase that I generally don't like to use, but stick taps to the fans for trying to keep a stiff upper lip. And it's tough. I mean, it was a really tough loss. It was really.
So, Jess, just along that line, then, so just give us an idea of what the callers were like on Game 6, because just to get their pulse.
It wasn't as negative as I expected. There was a lot of like, well, that stunk. Great season, good guys. We're excited for next year, but woof, that was brutal. There were a couple attempts to sort of talk about the refs, which is not a conversation that I ever particularly am interested in. I totally understand it. It's just not one that I personally care about.
Right.
My attitude is always, and it's totally cliche, but sometimes cliches are cliche for a reason. My attitude is always sort of, if your team is any good, you won't be in a position where a bad call can influence the outcome. So I'm just not. Yeah. It just doesn't interest me. It's like, do human beings make mistakes? Sure they do. Are the referees humans? Yes. So sometimes mistakes are going to be made. You have to be so good but most people were pretty, positive is not the right word, but most people were measured in their disappointment, I would say.
Were there a lot of, were the comments, I'm just wondering, were a lot of people calling for the coach's head, the GM's head, or were people saying, I'm done. I'm getting rid of my tickets. My season.
No, but the one thing that I've noticed, and listen, back before I worked for the team, to be clear, and I try to be as honest about this as possible, I was an online troll. I take pride in it. I don't think it's necessarily something. I don't take pride in all of it. I was an anonymous internet troll, and so that the anonymous part is particularly cowardly. But the point is that different platforms self-select different audiences. Mm-hmm. So the people that you see on Twitter, and I've said this before and gotten in trouble from the different audiences that congregate on different platforms for saying it, but the audience you find on Twitter and the audience you find on Reddit and the audience you find in Discord and on Facebook and, people who call in and listen to Kings Talk as opposed to your other options, it's a self-selecting audience. And so the people who listen to Kings Talk and call in, and we have a number of regular callers and I adore them, because I don't and haven't turned the show hostile in tone, that is not the tone of the callers. Do people call in and say, I don't think this player or coach or executive is doing a good job? Certainly. For obvious reasons, I can't expand on that, those thoughts. My rule is I try to give everybody at least one lap. If somebody wants to call in and complain about something, I will hear them out. Once they've had their say, I will give my response as best I think I can. And if they have a response to what I said, fine. If they want to just run their lap again, that's when I will. And it's only happened, I think, once or twice where somebody called in and said, I'm mad. This is what I'm mad about. Fire everybody in a rocket ship into the sun. And you go, okay, I hear you. I totally understand why you feel that way, but it's not reasonable. So moving on. And then they want to have their second go at putting everybody on a rocket ship and firing it into the sun. And that's when you have to step in and go like, okay, I heard you, but.
Okay. Well, I haven't been a fan in 100 years, but yeah, from that standpoint, are there really that many people that just say, that's it, I give up? I mean, you're in the playoffs. It was but you still got a nucleus of a lot of young guys besides the older guys. And
Ted, you touched on a very crucial, important phrase there, which is, are there anybody that says that?
No, I mean,
sure.
Well, there's always somebody. I'm talking about in
thousands
general,
of people that say it. The question is, do they do it? I mean, if I had a nickel for every time in my earlier years that I said, I'm not rooting for this team anymore, what is the point of this? And then next year, or the next day, even I was right back, and the thing that fascinates me the most, and listen, I am as guilty of this as anybody. So this is not a judgment, but there are people who exist on these self-selecting platforms where the fights that have been going on between the same small group of people for decades now, right? Like the internet's old enough now that some of these fights go back decades, like not, maybe only 2 decades, but still decades. Like, and it's the same people having the same fight. And at some point I just look at it and I go, would you two put each other on ignore? Like you don't know this person. You're not married to them. You don't work with them. It's just a random stranger. And the thing that I've found is that once you meet, there'll be somebody who I see them repeat their opinion over and over and over and over again. And I will call this person out because I like them. And this is the opposite of what I'm talking about. This is a person who, there's a fan named Johnny Utah, who calls himself Johnny Utah. And anybody who's on King's message boards or Facebook or Reddit or whatever probably knows the name. And if you know the name, you know that his shtick is he wants the team to be bigger, stronger, tougher. He loves fighters. He loves fourth line grinders. That's his thing.
If he wants bigger, he should be Johnny Mammoth from now on.
Well, he loves the movie Point Break, I guess. But like that's been his shtick as long as I can remember reading his name. And I always assumed that when I met him, I would realize, oh, this guy's an idiot and I don't have to care what he thinks, so who cares? Then I met him and he's a perfectly lovely, delightful guy. And now I find the fact that he won't get off this one subject kind of charming. But just the same, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's just, listen, I like strawberry yogurt. So if we're talking about yogurt, it's always going to be strawberries for me. And that's just, he likes fighters. So that's what he's going to bring up. But before I actually met him, I was like, I had all these preconceived notions about who he was. And so that's fighting on the internet. Like I said to someone that we all know recently, I said, he called me up and asked me how I was doing. And I said, well, I'm, fighting on the internet. And he said, are you winning? And I said, no, if anytime you're fighting on the internet, you're losing. That's just, it's a waste of time, but it's one of my hobbies. So what are you going to do?
Okay. What are you going to do?
So Jess, I mean, this was a tumultuous week that we've gone through for the Kings.
Yeah.
You wake up, was it Monday or Tuesday, and we're all expecting to go to just a Jim Hiller exit meeting press conference and player availability, and 15 minutes before that starts, we hear that Rob Blake and the Kings have parted ways, and so we're going through that. I thought that Jim Hiller was quite candid and honest. I thought the players were very honest. I think that there were some players like a Jordan Spence who, had a very tough playoff for himself personally and was as candid with his comments. Mm-hmm. And then you had Luc Robitaille the following day address the media and just talk about the direction of the team. I look at the roster and I've said to people, like, I don't even know if John Cooper walked through the door today, which he's not going to since he's still employed by the Lightning. But I don't know how much he could improve this team right now. But maybe he could. Just if they were to let Jim Hiller go, because we don't know what the new GM is going to do. But
yeah,
you're the GM. I mean, you're whoever comes in the door as the new GM. What would you say are the top 2 or 3 things that you feel this organization needs to do to take that next step?
Well, I was fascinated by the fact that Luc Robitaille mentioned multiple times the idea of a new voice. That was the most unexpected part of that whole discussion to me, because, that felt to me very authentic for whatever reason. And, press conferences in sports rarely feel authentic to me.
By the way, can I jump in real quick on that statement?
Sure.
Because I want to say, and it is rare that I would say this, I watched all of the press, because I didn't go. I watched every player, the coach, and Luke last night. That's the most impressive end of season release of all the guys that I've ever seen in any sport. I'm serious.
You mean just because of how comprehensive
in their
it was?
interviews?
Yeah.
They were. Yeah. I didn't see one guy that was just saying, I don't want to talk to you. I mean, a lot of times it's like, especially after that kind of a loss, they have no interest in talking to anybody about it. And they were incredibly candid and totally upfront with their feelings.
I was having this conversation with a friend of mine yesterday who I haven't seen in a while. And he asked me about, my opinions as somebody who has worked in media, as media, capital M media. And I interrupted him and I said, I'm not the media. And he said, well, what are you? And I said, I'm a shill. And he was like, oh, that's an interesting distinction. And I was like,
that's
well,
Mr. Shill.
But I mean, I am. I'm a team employee. Like I don't have a degree in journalism. I don't have an editor. I don't answer to some concept of objectivity or whatever. Like I'm a team employee. I protect the shield. Like that's right. Now I've said publicly, and I mean it, I'm not going to lie. Right. I may not always say my full opinions, but I'm not going to lie. But I'm also, I have responsibilities. Like that's just one of my favorite lines from any movie is from the movie SLC Punk. And it's about a kid growing up in Salt Lake City who decides he wants to be a punk rocker. And of course, his parents are very straight-laced denizens of Salt Lake City. And at one point, he's yelling at his dad and he calls him a sellout. And the dad says, I didn't sell out, son. I bought in. Which is a distinction I wouldn't have understood when I was younger. Anyway, back to Luke Robitaille, the GM.
Candid,
so the concept, what's that? Yes, totally. And the concept of a different voice was interesting because this organization has had consistency within its executive ranks. Almost for 20 years, right? Yes, they lost Dean Lombardi, but Rob Blake was promoted and he had been there prior, and Nelson Emerson and Mark Yannetti and Glenn Murray. And, there are a number of people in a number of different positions who precede that change.
Right. Yeah. But Dean
scouting staff.
Dean came in from the outside though. I mean,
yes,
let's not forget that.
No, but Dean came in and the phrase cleaned house, I don't think is really appropriate enough. And I don't think people who aren't devoted to like the minutia of staffing understand when he came in, it cleaned house. That did not happen in 2017. There was a change at the top in 2017. Right. So the idea of a new voice is interesting because, there is an LA Kings way of doing things,
right?
That has at least been attempted to be maintained over that change. So bringing in somebody different would be
refreshing.
Listen,
it depends who the person is. You bring a bad person in, that screws everything up.
Well, so my mantra this past summer was it can always get worse. Mm-hmm. And I was saying it about a number of different things, right? The team was changing, the logo changed, the jerseys changed, like all this changed. And everyone was, people were particularly excited about some of it. Now, as it turns out, malaise, it might be a side effect of certain types of cancer. So it might be that I just had some sort of preconceived, like ill feelings, whatever. Anyway, the point is I have since changed my mantra from it can always get worse to it always will get worse. So, which is just a personal thing for me. Yes. But so bringing in a new voice, yes, it can be great. It can also be like, oh, well, things were working out. And, as Luke Robitaille said, Rob Blake leaves the team with a great roster. You can feel however you want about that. I happen to agree with it. But bringing in a different voice, I guess where I'll quibble with the concept of a great roster is I don't think that this is a great roster because I think a great roster can withstand subtle tweaks and changes. I think this roster is balanced precariously on a very specific blend of talents. And if you tamper with it, you run the risk of perhaps not having the best repetition of results, right? Like Darcy Kemper put in a Vezina-worthy season as goaltender, and Vladislav Gavrikov played an incredible season filling in for Drew Doughty. If Darcy Kemper, for whatever reason, does not replicate that performance, and Vladislav Gavrikov does not sign a new contract.
Yeah.
Do we know that the team can withstand that loss? I mean, I don't know.
Well, right now
but
we know nothing, because until they get a general manager, it doesn't even matter, right? I mean, this is all just that. It's more than speculation.
Sure.
Until they get a new voice.
But I do want to say to you, Jesse, I think you make a really good point there, because I think in a small way, we saw some of that in the playoffs this year. And, the absence of Tanner Jeannot, I'm not saying that he would have been the difference in them, beating Edmonton, but Jim Hiller and his staff felt that they did not have an adequate replacement for Tanner Jeannot in the playoff games in the way that they distributed minutes for whether it be Jeff Malott or Sammy Helenius to resemble any bit of that role. So taking one guy out, it sure seemed to have a ripple effect, in my opinion, in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, and that's why I say that's the difference between a great roster and a very good roster that's built on, a little bit of everything has to go right. But having said that, I mean, and this is just a function of how the league works and how playoffs work. I think everybody would have agreed that there were some teams that had great rosters that are now currently not in the playoffs anymore. And so, plans of mice and men, right? Like stuff happens.
Yeah. What I want to say is about what Luke, the way he stressed.
Yeah.
I've never seen him in this frame of mind getting a new voice. The way he said it was, you know what? I think that's what we need. And I think that's not only refreshing, I think it's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Now it all depends who that new voice is. If you get a guy who can't talk, that's not much of a voice. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and just going to add this in for color. And John's heard me make this argument before, so apologies, John. When the Edmonton Oilers finally hired an analytics department, I don't remember what year it was, 2018 or something like that. The internet rejoiced with, finally Edmonton's one of us, right? All the analytics Twitter accounts, they finally got the hint, and they're, and okay, now everybody can agree that expected goals and Corsi are the most important thing on the planet. And all I said at the time and thought at the time was the only thing, and I'm not even going to apologize for this, the only thing the Edmonton Oilers have done right over the last 20 years is draft Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl.
Or beat the Kings 4 straight.
No, I'm sorry. That's it. They don't have a goalie. Like I saw an argument yesterday that said the way to win in the playoffs is have a bad goalie. Well, okay, fine. Ha, ha, ha. Very funny. Calvin Pickard just won 4 games in a row with a sub 900 save percentage. Great. Talk to me in June.
Right.
If they're, listen, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are that good. The point I'm making is if an organization has a history of making the wrong choice, even if they finally decide to make the right choice, what evidence did we have that Edmonton would know what to do when it came to hiring an analytics staff, or that they would prioritize the right things?
Right.
So hiring a new voice could be, like I said, it could be great. It could be incredibly dangerous because
it is.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I will say though, with Edmonton, they figured something out, because the guys that they have added along the way, the goaltending thing they haven't figured out. Okay. But what I did want to say is that in the playoffs this year, they've scored 11 goals and given up 7 with McDavid and Draisaitl not on the ice. So they're +4. They were -20 in the regular season. So there's some, they have made some moves that have made this team better. We'll see where it all goes.
I'm being hyperbolic for effect. The Edmonton Oilers have obviously done plenty right, but my point is they had the first overall pick for 5 or 6 years before stumbling into Connor McDavid. Yeah. And even after Connor McDavid, they still had, Puljujarvi 4th overall. That was not a great pick. Kyler Yamamoto that didn't work out for them. Evan Bouchard did. Broberg, they fumbled. Holloway, they fumbled. You know what I mean? Like, we talk about great rosters and very good rosters. The Edmonton Oilers have had the opportunity with those 2 incredible players to have great rosters, and they have yet to assemble a great roster.
Well, I think it was a lot of.
I'm not trying to pick on Edmonton too much, but I'm still mad.
But I think to your point, though, I think there was bad management. So to Ted's point about it's not, you've got to bring in the right guy, because along the way there were some really bad contracts that they gave out that limited their ability. So
yeah, well, the Kings have the same disease as Edmonton and a lot of teams and many franchises in all of sports. It's hard to go outside the organization and think you picked the right guy. As I say in the first line in my book, Touching Greatness, the first line, my dad
available at all bookstores now.
No, Amazon.
Oh, Amazon. Sorry.
But thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Talk about shill. You're a hell of a shill. But seriously, folks, the first line in the book, my dad whispers in my ear, "It's all who you know, kid." Okay. And that's what it is. That's all of life. You could be the greatest at anything, the perfect pianist at the age of 5. It doesn't matter if nobody hears you or if you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Can I share with you, Ted, I mentioned this on All the King's Men this week, and I think John has heard me say this a number of times. I recently stumbled across a stat that I hate. Okay. I hate it so much because it's true.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, but it is true. And that is that only 3 coaches in the history of the National Hockey League have ever won the Stanley Cup with more than one franchise.
Yeah.
Okay.
And 2 of them did it. I want to say, well, one of them did it before World War II, and the other one might have won one of them before World War II, and the other one after World War II.
Do you remember?
What's that?
Who was the guy who won it before?
Gorman, I think his name was. I forgot. I'd have to Google it. But I mean, like, and only 2 general managers have done it, and one of them was the coach who did it in 1934 and 1935.
That is a great stat.
Yeah.
And listen, as you know, Zach Dooley always says, stats are not predictive. So the fact that it's only happened 3 times does not mean it can never happen again.
Of course.
But it's only happened 3 times. Yeah. 2 of them were before the original 6, and one of them was Scotty Bowman, who is widely recognized as the greatest coach in the history of hockey. So if you're telling me that in order for this to happen again, we need to either stumble onto the greatest coach, or something that happened 100 years ago.
Okay, well, here's the most important thing. It comes down to odds on there, right? It's not likely it's going to make a giant difference. And the guy on the right over there, Jonathan, knows a little bit about odds. So if there was an over-under in Vegas, John, on whoever comes in is going to win the cup, you better get great damn odds.
Sure, but my point is just going outside the organization. When you're compiling these lists, and I've seen a bunch of people compile lists today, who's the next Kings general manager going to be? And a number of names on them are predictable names. It's guys that have had success and other franchises, or in some cases, guys who didn't have success with other franchises, which is even more confusing to me. Like, I get if you want to hire a guy who won a cup with a different team, but why do I want to hire a guy who failed to make the playoffs 9 out of the 12 years he was the GM of? I don't just because he's from Finland anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and I've just sort of reached a point, the real point of all this, and I mentioned it again on All the King's Men. It's the existential crisis that I'm currently dealing with in hockey anyway.
Yes.
I just don't know. I no longer personally believe in the evaluations that we use to determine who's good and bad at specific jobs.
Well, I actually totally disagree with you, because it depends who that person. Yeah, exactly. It depends who the person is who's making that decision. I mean, if it's me, you, and John, we might all pick 3 different guys for different reasons.
Sure.
And your reason for you is going to be like, hey, I don't believe in the way everybody comes up with this decision, but I had to make one.
Right.
So,
but,
I mean, it's
but like the roster of coach of the year winners,
right,
who are then fired within the 3 seasons after winning it.
Right.
And you go, well, I'm sorry, did they forget how to be a good coach? No, the circumstances changed, which means to me that circumstances dictate results. Right. In which case, in order to evaluate the job someone's done, you have to look at all of the circumstances rather than just the results. But of course, it is a results-based business. Sorry, my hands don't fit in the box. It's a results-based business. And so, and if you go online or, and of course we live in an ever, immediate reaction world.
Yes.
Well, Colorado lost in the first round. Should we fire everybody, take half the roster, put them on a rocket, and fire into the sun? And I'm just like, well, I don't know. They won 4 years ago. Like, is it possible that they've forgotten how to do everything they need to do, or is it just like sometimes it doesn't work out?
Right.
Well, you think about just along the whole coaching thing. I mean, think about Jim Montgomery this year. Gets fired in Boston.
Right.
48 hours later, he's behind the St. Louis Blues bench.
Yeah.
The Bruins have had a habit of, firing guys and other teams hiring them. Yeah. Look, there's a lot that goes into it. And there's no science. Like, even when it comes to drafting players, you think about where guys like Zetterberg and Datsuk were drafted. I mean, 7th and 8th or 8th rounds. Like, if people thought they were that good, they wouldn't have been drafted that low. So that's, and the same thing, look, there's not an exact science. And some people can stumble into things. Look, I look at the job, just take it back to the Kings for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're trying to evaluate, the job that Rob did, look, the first thing, and I've said this many times, 8 years under his regime, they didn't make the playoffs. He's got to own some of that. But does he own all of it? No, because I really think that, hey, there may have been reasons why he couldn't, make a trade or sign a player that he had no control of, or he had a trade, or he made a trade that he didn't have full control of. So, but he's got to wear it because he's the guy that's the GM.
Yeah, well, that's the job.
I was going to say, though, that's a perfect example, though, of a guy who is a career king, except for a couple of years, and knowing the right people, right? Being friends with Luke and all of that stuff, that all comes into play here. If it was just Joe Schmo, who he wouldn't have lasted 8 years.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, and look, and so
that's part of it. That's just part of the equation.
100%. And look, there's been a lot of vitriol about the job that Jim Hiller did in the playoffs. And I think a lot of there's criticism that is definitely, I think, is fair.
Right.
But, I think you don't want to, for whatever reason he got hired, he was hired. And I think that you would hope that, hey, look, we all fail and screw up in our jobs. And so.
Speak for yourself.
Pardon?
Speak for yourself.
Okay, well, I am speaking for myself. But I would hope that, that whatever mistake, the mistakes that look, whatever the mistakes that he made, the timeout and,
right.
Maybe, not managing the roster, I think that many of us feel properly. Hey, I would think that, you hope that he's smart enough that he's going to learn from that.
Right.
And let's see where it goes next year. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that he gets a mulligan. Bill Belichick was a horrible coach in Cleveland. Look what happened. Granted, he had, he found this guy.
Was he a horrible coach, or he just didn't have a roster? You can't be a good coach or manager if you don't have the players.
Well, as they say, right? No, absolutely. So, I guess where I'm going with it is.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in real quick, John. Ted, you can be a good coach. You just can't be a winning coach without a roster. And I guess that's the distinction that I'm struggling with, is that we decide that winning is what makes coaches good or bad.
Absolutely.
And it's more complicated than that,
By
which
the
is not
way,
a concept that sports fans are particularly interested in.
Right, exactly. But Jesse, you mentioned Scotty Bowman. Okay. I had it was such an incredible time at a Ducks game about, 10 years ago, whatever it was. I think it was a playoff game. And Scotty Bowman comes into the press box and sits next to me. So I think it had to be a Blackhawks game because he was there for his son, right? At the time. So we started talking, and we knew some, mutual people and stuff. And I asked him, I said, hey, isn't it amazing that when you go to this roster, you become a great coach, and when you go to that roster, all of a sudden you're not as great a coach anymore? And he goes, it's all about the players, baby. We can put out whatever you want. I mean, it's appreciate all of the fun stuff that people care about us and praise us. But if we don't have players, it's all meaningless.
Well, but there's also something that Jim Hiller must have done right this year for the team to have the regular season success that they had over an 82 game schedule. I mean,
right.
It's just that when the lights shine the brightest, things just kind of fell apart for the team. And, not all on the coach, but, he has to own some of it. And the players have to own some of it as well.
Right.
It's okay. So now, Jess, it's like, okay, so now where does this team move forward? When you're looking at it, you've got your captain has got 1 year left on his deal. He said, I'm under contract next year, and we'll see what happens after that. Got I think 2 years left with Drew Doughty. You got an agent, Phil Deneau. Quentin Byfield continues to emerge. You've got Mikey Anderson on the blue line. Really impressed with just, you deal with him far more than I do, Jess. But I'm listening to that guy speak. I'm like, that guy should, I'm like, that guy could wear a C at some point. It wouldn't surprise me.
Before we go too far, guys,
Mm-hmm.
we're jumping the gun because I want to play the sound before we get into the future of the team. All right.
Okay.
So let me play Jim Hiller and some guy named Davis asking him a question.
Oh, shit.
I've heard players and coaches say that there are players that get you to the playoffs and players that get you through. And sometimes some guys can be both. But it appeared that, at least, the way that certain guys were used, that there were guys that just you felt couldn't get you through the playoffs. Is that a fair statement?
No, I don't think that's a fair statement. I think every team has different strengths and I get every opponent, maybe let me say it that way, has different strengths and weaknesses. And this particular team had certain strengths, that we were wary of. And so had we played a different opponent, it might have been different. Had we beat Edmonton and gone on to somebody else, things would have been different again. I don't think they're static, for me at least. They're not static from series to series. I think you have to evaluate the team you're playing and make your choices. So I can't say that from one series to the next things would look the same. And I think you probably, at least my style, you've seen that over the last year or so, that I do maybe some different things, right or wrong. That's the way I do it. It's maybe not as traditional as others at times.
I'm dealing with the media.
I thought that was pretty good, didn't you guys? No, honestly, I tried to. I mean, I can do it. I can do it a couple different ways. I can give you next to nothing if I choose, right? I really can. I don't know. I don't recall. I'm just an answer. Or I can give you as thoughtful of an answer as I have for the moment. And I hope I tried to strike the balance with you guys. And the playoffs was a little bit different. We tried to keep it a little bit tighter than we typically do. And I thought you guys were fair to me. Good. I thought the relationship was good. So and I hope I can continue to give you guys good information, give you my thoughts as best as I can. You don't have to agree with them. I get that. That's the name of the game here. But if I give you not next to nothing, I don't know if I'm being fair to you guys in that regard.
Well, I'll tell you what, Jim Hiller, in my opinion, is as fair as any coach out there. I mean, he gives us. We got a job to do, and he knows it, and that's a good thing.
Who asked? I wasn't there. Who asked him? Who threw in the?
I wasn't there either.
Short follow-up about the media.
Dennis.
Okay.
Dennis.
Okay.
Yeah, I included that because I wanted to give Jim a little credit there on how he does deal with us.
Well, so I'm assuming, and I don't know, I haven't spoken to anybody about it. I wasn't there. I'm assuming the reference was to what happened in Edmonton. And
I have no idea.
It felt very much like the answer was about what had just happened today and did not acknowledge that it was a reference to whatever. Listen, I clocked that answer when I watched it myself.
Okay.
It registered with me as one of the few things that I really took away from it, because I think essentially what Jim Hiller was saying was, and it's without going into whether or not I agree with the decisions he made as coach, I know from my own perspective that I make decisions about how I do my job that other people may not agree with. Or may not, I was talking to my friend yesterday and we were talking about whether or not I'm good at my job. And I said, I think I'm great at my job, but to be fair, to be perfectly clear, I don't do my job the way like a Pat McAfee or a Stephen A. Smith or somebody like that.
But everybody does their jobs different.
Right. But I mean, like I was watching Steve Dangle, who started doing what he does at about the same time I do. Now, in his defense, he does it much louder, much more passionately, and in a totally different market than I do. But we approach our jobs differently, and his audience is obviously far larger than mine. But the point is, I have frequently couched what I say with, listen, I approach this differently, but that's how I square it with myself. And that's what I heard Jim Hiller say essentially, which is, listen, I know I do things differently. I know I do things differently. I prioritize things, in an unconventional way, and right or wrong, that's how I do them. Right. And during the 6-game losing streak in, was it March, February? I don't remember when it was, but they lost 6 games in a row. It was like 1 overtime loss, 4 regulation losses, and then an overtime loss. And people were concerned at the time. And I refused to be concerned. And one of the reasons why I said was like, look, this is, I talked to John about it at the time. I said, this is the team. They are who they are. They play the way they play. They prioritize the things they prioritize. They have been building this season to be who they are. And part of that identity is this 6-game losing streak. That it just is how it is.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they lost 4 games in a row at the worst possible time.
Exactly.
But
almost incredible. That
yes, and very difficult to deal with.
It's not easy to do either.
But Jim Hiller's answer was essentially my answer at the 4-game losing streak, which listen, this is who we are, or in his case, this is who I am.
Right.
And I make the decisions I make, and they won't all be good and they won't all be bad, and you can deal with that however you like, but this is who I am.
So before we go on, John, I want to play Drew Doughty talking about the end of the season. All right.
Okay. Then I'll just follow up to what Jesse said. I'll
tell you what, follow up now. If it's about Jim Hiller.
Yeah. So whether I agree with it or not is immaterial, right? Like
nobody cares anyway. You know that,
right? It doesn't matter. My point is that if this team feels that it's close to being a cup contender, you can't be a cup contender if you're only going to use 75% of your roster when it matters most. That's kind of my.
Okay, and you know what? That's a perfect lead-in. I'm going to hold off on Doughty. I'm going to play Adrian Kempe, who talked about the wear and tear of using just 3 lines. Didn't affect him personally, though.
Adrian, after Game 6, he talked about Games 3 and 4 really swinging the series. Did you feel like you guys recovered, whether it was physically from the minutes or psychologically from the disappointment in Games 5 and 6?
Personally, I don't feel that way. I've been... over the years, you start to play more minutes. Looking back at the minutes that I played in Game 5, Game 6, didn't feel like it was any different from the games before. But maybe, I can only obviously speak for myself in that case. But I think, playing 3 lines through, almost a full series, I think it could be tough. It could be tough if you go further in the playoffs. I think that you maybe need, to maybe play some more lines and some more guys to, not have, top guys get too tired. You look at Edmonton, they, in the previous years when they played us, how much they played Leon and Connor, and then, you move on to the next rounds and you feel like, maybe they're getting tired too. So, it's tough to say, but like I said, personally, I don't think I was getting tired in Game 5 or 6. It still felt pretty fresh.
I think he was very honest about that, hey, it didn't affect me that much personally, but if you keep going out of the playoffs, and then Hiller said, well, the next round it might be totally different because it's all about matchups.
Well, you got to get to the next round, though.
Well, I know.
and look, Kempe's production tailed off. He was.
So you say because he was worn out?
I don't know if it was. No, I think Edmonton had a different game plan from my understanding. Look, we had Jack Michaels and Louis on the show, and prior to game 3, or after, no.
Yeah, I can't remember now. It was 3 or 4.
No, it could have been. I don't remember. But they talked about how Kempe was going to be more of a focal point,
right,
for the Oilers in trying to take him out of the game. So.
Well, I don't know if they took him out of the game, but certainly he wasn't as productive on the score sheet as he would have liked. But hey, it's a long series. You never know what's going to happen. Yeah. Yes, Jesse.
In a series where the Kings are not going to get scoring from their top line, and a series where the Oilers are not going to get scoring from their top line. First of all, not getting scoring from their top line still means a point or two per game.
Yes,
which is
always
really annoying. That is part of the reason why people had such high expectations for this series, because the belief was that in that scenario, the Kings would have more scoring options than the Oilers. And what happened is that the Oilers' depth carried them through games 5 and 6. And again, what did Connor McDavid have? 3 points in those two games? I mean,
he had 2 points, and I brought that up to Jim Hiller.
2 and 5 and 1 and 6. Yeah, I think
he had in game 5, which was the game back in LA. He had the 1 assist. He and Leon each had 1 assist on the empty net goal.
Right.
And then
he had 2 in game 6.
2 or 1.
I don't know. The point is, he still got points, even though he didn't get any points.
I raised the question to, I think he only had 1, to be honest, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I raised that issue to Hiller that you guys took them out of the game, for the most part. They weren't, but I felt coming into the series, the depth of LA is what was going to carry them through. And it ended up being the opposite.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I was going to say, from McDavid's standpoint, he was just a highlight reel as far as watching him skate, but he wasn't getting a lot done. I thought the Kings did a great job not giving him they just always had somebody shadowing him at all times, and he's skating around and he looks like he's ready for the ice volleys. It's wonderful. He reminded me of Gene Carr, the old King from 100 years ago, a great guy, and unfortunately just passed away a little while back. Gino was flying up and down the wing, and his hair is flowing in the background, and look at him skate, and he'd get like 13 goals and 12 assists or something. It's like it doesn't matter.
By the way, McDavid had 1 assist in each of the last 2 games.
Okay.
Yeah, and listen,
credit the Kings too, though.
But it pains me to praise McDavid and the Oilers because I'm a Kings homer, but it does matter, because even if you do devote somebody to shutting down those 2 players, that's then energy and time that they don't have towards scoring their own goals. And so if you're going to play 3 lines and 4 defensemen, and one of your lines and one of your pairs is devoted to not letting Connor McDavid have 4 points, that matters. Like, that's a straight, like it's resources that you are marshaling in the direction of a goal. But then those resources are not available for other things. And so, that gets into the difference between a great roster and a very good roster. Now,
no doubt.
Yeah.
Well, let's hear a couple of quick comments from Byfield and Anderson.
Quentin, how hard will it be to move past the end of game 4?
Yeah, obviously, I think it sucks. Like in the moment there, like, my thought process in that was, I didn't want to ice the puck on an empty netter, and try to make the safe, smart play and chip it out, and I didn't get that out. So I think that play there will, when you think about that all summer, honestly, if I make that play there, we're up 3-1. So, that's a tough one to swallow, and I think all summer I'll be thinking about that, and something that could have been a what if, and I got to deal with that, and play for all the boys all the time, and that moment I felt like I let them down, and let them down in the playoffs there.
Mikey, Jim Drew shared with us that there was no message from the coaching staff in terms of like sitting back or playing a passive game when you guys had a lead late. So what was the message from the coaching staff when you guys were playing maybe those late third period leads?
I mean, it's hard, right? You feel like no matter who you're playing, if you're up, they're going to have a tendency to push a little bit harder, and I think just instinctually you maybe pull back a little bit. I mean, we weren't sitting there saying we're trying to stand and basically just let them, keep coming. Sometimes that just happens. You try and maybe play a little bit safer. But it's not like we were, getting told or trying to, as a group wanting to sit back. So sometimes maybe just the way it goes. But even some of those games, like we still had a few chances. I think it was game 4, 4 minutes left. Kev hits the pipe, like that goes in. Now it's 4-2. Something, little things happen. That's just the way hockey is. Like you get a bounce, you don't get a bounce. But it's just the way she went.
What about about as honest as it gets, guys?
Yeah, I still think it would. I don't think the one where I was disappointed with Hiller was I really felt he threw Byfield under the bus.
In what way?
He singled him out. He said after that game, he mentioned Byfield and the fact that he didn't make that play.
I have no problem with that. Why? If he doesn't say that, then he said, "Why didn't you bring it up? You're afraid to?" And look, I've interviewed a head coach thousands of times, right?
Hang on.
And that's the argument we get when they say something you shouldn't have said. You know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. It should never have got to that point. They blew a 3-1 lead. He shouldn't have made the
mistake. A guy makes a mistake.
I understand, but it goes beyond. It's not as simple. Jess, I don't know what your feeling is. I just my feeling is that they were up by 2 goals going to the third period. That was one of many plays. But it shouldn't have been just about Byfield. It should have been we should never have been in the position that he had to make that play. Is more of what I'm saying.
Okay, real quick, by the way, this is a great example of how 99% of these guys, coaches included by far, have no media training, okay? They're doing this off the top of their head after a game.
I'm glad you said that, Ted.
It's the truth.
No, I don't disagree, but I'm glad you said it because I was sitting there quietly trying to figure out how to insert what I want to say into this conversation.
Please do.
This is how, by the way, you spin something by being honest, but totally changing the subject. We the industry of professional sports in North America in the year of our Lord 2025 do media wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We do it wrong. The point of post-game media availabilities and post-season media availabilities has shifted so much from when it was originally introduced. When it was originally introduced, there was no access to these people. So if you were a beat writer or a national writer covering the Stanley Cup final in 1965, nobody else was there to see how the coach responded to your question or even what the coach said.
This is a show by itself, Jesse.
I understand. They would get a clip that, or, a written quote that the writer chose to remove from an entire thing.
They would get a clip from me.
Well,
12 seconds.
Now, but I'm saying if it was written, it wouldn't be a clip. It would just be written, a quote. Now what we have is the entire thing is videotaped.
Right.
And so, and you guys know this better than anybody, in let's just take the Luc Robitaille press availability, because that was the one I listened to and I could tell all the voices.
And it's coming up shortly.
Yeah. Well, the one from a few days ago.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I have some sound from him.
So in the room, let's say there were a dozen reporters in the room, and I don't know how many there were, but let's just use a dozen, just whatever. 3 of them represent legacy media. They have deadlines. They have editors. They have to submit work that has to be approved by a corporate mountain of people, right? They can't just say whatever they want, because if they do, there's lawyers, there's fact checkers, there's HR, there's concerns. 3 of the people are totally independent. They have their own blogs. They answer to nobody. They can say whatever they want. They can be as salacious or inflammatory as they like. 3 of the people are team employees who are not going to say anything, particularly critical. And then another 3 people are in quasi-official roles, but their allegiances are not exactly known. But the point is, when I'm listening to that, so somebody asks a question. They get an answer. And instead of a follow-up to that question, right, which might have led to an interesting conversation, which might have shed some light.
It doesn't work that way. We don't get follow-up.
The next person up gets a question. And if it's one of the 3 people from legacy media, I can tell from the question exactly what article they're going to write. Because I know that they're hunting for, the phrase I used earlier this year and somebody objected to was, essentially these availabilities are a gang of media looking to trick a coach or player into saying something that fits the story they've already written in their head.
Dead wrong. You're dead. Let me tell you where
I'm
you're
not,
dead
though, Ted.
You are dead wrong.
I'm not.
Yeah, you are, because here's
I'm
you
not.
can say you're not, and you can say
I'm
you're a
gonna keep
girl,
saying
but you're
it.
a guy. Okay,
Well, that's a
today-
whole.
I
That's a
know.
whole other podcast.
I heard rumors, but it's a whole different story. Here's where you're dead wrong.
Yeah.
Because it is individual. There are great media and there are bad media. I've been dealing with this for 50 years. There are people. No, don't give me that look. There are. I got you, media. I'm going to ask you a question until you give me the damn response I want, so I can.
Yes,
say,
but Ted, if I sit down at a blackjack table with 5 of the best blackjack players in the world, and sitting at third base is the worst blackjack player in the world, table's ruined, and I'm getting up and leaving. So it doesn't matter.
I don't get it.
Because media availabilities should be a team sport, and they're not. They're viewed as each individual coming in trying to get what they can get out of it, and the end result is that none of us gets anything particularly meaningful, because instead of, even if it's one journalist in a room, instead of getting any kind of conversation or feedback or nuance, the next person who's writing a story that is King's not sure who next GM is, looking for outside voice, any question they ask is going to be in search of a quote to serve that article. They already have,
but it doesn't mean it's
12 paragraphs written about it.
But it's just not an I gotcha thing.
No, I'm not saying I gotcha.
But that's the way you said it up front.
Well, I apologize if I presented it that way. My point is that it is multiple different voices serving multiple different interests.
But if we had access to the players like we used to, this wouldn't be like this.
All right. Well, if my aunt had wheels, she'd be a bicycle. Like we
we don't have access. So look, no, we don't.
It's different.
We don't have access. In the old days, you walk in the room and they're all there, and you can get anybody you want. And it was like that forever. Now they're not there anymore. So you got to get what you can get in the hurry.
Well,
that's reality.
So I'm not. To be clear, I'm not attacking anybody who was in that room who asked questions.
No, I'm not saying you are.
I'm just saying the way we as the industry set the stage is not optimized to serve the needs of anybody. It doesn't help the fans, because the fans don't get anything. They just, we wind up having a 30-minute conversation
about. It's not just the industry. It's the teams.
Well,
the teams are setting it up.
Well, that is the industry. I mean, say it however you want.
They have nothing to do with the media, though. They don't have anything to do with the media asking questions. They have something to do with giving you access to the players.
But the rules dictate that you have to do it, and everybody's been doing it the same way for decades, and so that's how it goes.
Yeah, but again, if you don't have access to the players, you can't do what you want to do on your own. You have to do it in front of everybody.
No. I'm just like, but to your point, Jess, like, my questions are going to be different than Ted's questions, because we're all. It's not. What I'm looking for, what I need to do is different than potentially Ted. Now, Ted may ask the question that I want, and I don't have to ask it anymore.
But it doesn't mean you have an agenda, John. It just means you need.
But again, I think you're reading too much into my concept of agendas. All I'm saying is when you, and I'm not talking about the players in this case. I'm just want to focus on the executive. But sure, the players is a separate conversation. So you're not going to get access to Luc Robitaille that much, which means the limited access you get in a media availability should be incredibly valuable. Right? If value is derived from scarcity, then this should be the most valuable thing you get. Because how often do you get to talk to the president of a hockey club? Once a year when the team loses in the playoffs? Maybe at the draft? Maybe. Like, I don't know. It depends on the franchise. So instead, what we get is, okay, the general manager resigned yesterday. There's a million different conversations to be had. You've lost to the same team 4 years in a row. You haven't won a playoff round in 10 years. You've got upcoming free agents that are concerning. Your cap, there's a million different things you could talk about. Sure. Any one of them, if focused on for 20 minutes, might yield a number of interesting insights. But instead of focusing on any of them, we just get a scatter shot of, and I'm going to throw out some names, and I'm not trying to insult any of them, and anybody listening who knows these people knows that I know them, and I hope that they don't take it personally. Austin Stanovich is writing his story, so he wants his quote. And Andrew Knoll is writing a story, so he wants it. What's wrong with it, Ted, is that what you get is no focus on any one topic.
You're not good, but they're not there for a topic.
John, is what I'm saying making sense, or is Ted just not listening?
I'm listening, but they're not there for a topic.
I'm not blaming Ted. I'm not blaming the people
I'm not
who
saying
attend.
blaming anybody.
I'm saying the way the blackjack table is set up
so how would you do it differently?
Is not
real
optimized for everybody to win.
So if
the
you were
system is optimized for the dealer, and that is not.
Okay, so if you're the commissioner if you're the commissioner of the media in the NHL, how would you do it differently? Let's keep it short because I don't want to go too long, and I also want to play some sound here.
Sure. I don't know. I would do it differently. I would bring in a different. I would bring in a different voice.
You don't have. I would do it differently. I have no idea what that would be.
But... I would stop making it mandatory that we have post game and post series and postseason media availabilities that way.
Post game, you'd make it mandatory that we don't have it?
No, I'd say I wouldn't make it mandatory that we do. If teams want to, fine. But I think what happens now is that it's all set up. It's it's collectively bargained and it's agreed upon by everybody, and everybody just sort of looks at it and goes, "Well, we've been doing it for X amount of years, and I've heard all the arguments. It's a conduit for the fans. It's an opportunity for the fans to hear whatever, blah blah blah." But the reality is, we don't get much insight until somebody says something. Until somebody makes a mistake, and then we all pounce on it for 4 months and act as if, and we say, "Oh, well, did Jim Hiller throw Quentin Byfield onto the bus?" And it's like, well, I don't know if he was or wasn't, because he was asked one question by one person in a string of different people asking a string of different questions. He could have defended himself. He could have explained better, but he didn't, because he knows he's got 5 minutes. Right. Everybody else knows they've got 5 minutes. Everybody knows they want to say what they want to say. So one statement gets thrown out and repeated out of context ad nauseum, and now it becomes this big, massive conversation that is not really relevant to anything. Okay. Sorry, John.
Let me just say one thing real quick on to be extremely obvious. Okay,
mm-hmm. This is what it's like when Ted and I talk on the phone, by the way.
Yeah, which is hilarious. Anyway, I said we had to do it on the show sometime, and here we are. Okay, so here's an obvious statement. All right, guess what matters? What kind of a response you're going to get? It's how the question is asked. Okay.
Sometimes.
No. Well, yeah. I mean, if a guy doesn't want to talk, it doesn't matter, obviously. But if you ask a question in a good way, that's part of the equation here.
But if I ask a yes or no question to an answer,
that's a stupid question.
Well, okay, but sometimes you
don't ask her the yes or no question if you're a reporter.
Okay, but again. In LA particularly, if we have a dozen people, 75% of the people in the room might not have a degree in journalism or much experience in a professional journalistic setting. Well, whatever.
That's a scary thought.
I'm making up numbers. And the 3 people who do, maybe they're having a bad day. Or even if it's not a yes or no question, maybe if I said, "Ted, share your thoughts with me on asparagus." And you're like, "You know what? I just don't think about asparagus at all. What does that have to do with anything?" Well, okay. Was that useful in any way, shape, or form? No. Like, but by the way, asparagus is disgusting. Just for the record,
it is.
I happen to like it with butter, of course. But go ahead. Anything on that, John? Because I want to play Dowdy and
go play Dowdy.
Here's Dowdy. End of the season thoughts from Dowdy, which I thought were very good.
Drew, 4 years in a row to Edmonton. Does it matter that it was Edmonton all 4 years, or just losing 4 years in a row is just painful?
I mean, yeah, losing in general is just painful, but I mean, obviously it sucks that it was Edmonton all 4 times too, but no matter who we're playing, like Kobe said, our ultimate goal is, to win a championship, and we had a great opportunity this year to get the job done, and we didn't, and yeah, no matter what, it's frustrating. We play every year to win, and that's the bottom line.
How healthy were you?
I mean, I was obviously not 100%, but I felt like I could still play well, and thought I did at times. I thought I could have played better, but this summer will be very important, especially early in the summer, to get back my range and all these things with my ankle, and then have a good off season of training.
Anything you can share on what the summer entails for you, just to kind of get back to 100%?
Yeah, well, it's got to start with just getting the ankle back to 100%. And that's going to take a lot of work with physio and stuff like that, and then hopefully, that can get done in a month or so, and then get right into strength training.
Drew, was this group tighter than others? It seemed like that way, it felt that way, and does that make it this moment that much harder?
Yeah,
pause
it
right here.
Big time.
Okay, hold on. Okay.
That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about for quote hunting.
Yes.
was this a tight group, and was this tighter than previous groups in the past year? And no offense to Eric Stevens, who asked that question. You are looking for him to say, yes, it was. What an incredible group, and how disappointing it was that they lost. How is that the answer to that question contributing to the conversation of what happened in the year of our Lord 2025?
About that. Don't ask me.
No, but my point is that question was asked, which uses up time and space. Drew takes however long he takes to answer it. You've got PR standing in the corner with a stopwatch going like, okay, this is how much time we have left. Only so many questions, right? Each availability was not interrupted, but PR did their job and said, oh, last question, guys. Yes. That is time and energy devoted to an availability that is now no longer like, listen, I'm getting too passionate about this. Time, energy, and focus are the three greatest resources any person or organization has in life. And they are criminally undervalued. And so when you choose to spend time, energy, and focus on something to serve a purpose, a relatively banal purpose, no disrespect to Eric, I would love to see how that quote was used, but I can't imagine that it is in a particular, like I saw Eric's article about, the GM search. I don't know that the quote about what a strong group, I don't know, but that question gets inserted in a conversation that we could have talked about his ankle. Off-season concerns. He had a quote about the coaching staff and whether or not the coaching staff did or didn't. Ankle. You know what I mean? Like there were a million other conversations that could have happened with Drew Doughty.
Right. Well, we just did talk about the ankle. He just mentioned.
But I'm saying a follow-up question could have been asked.
The point. I understand your point. That was something for a specific article and wasn't necessarily germane to them being knocked out of the first round. I mean.
Right, but how many questions about that are you going to have? Me too. They already answered that some of that. Well, I mean, I'm playing a clip. I'm not playing the whole interview.
No, I understand. I was there. Like, you can tell when someone is writing something,
of course,
for a specific story. Like, I get it, and I'm not.
They got a job to do. That's why they're there.
I understand, but I understand. But I just understand. It goes to the point that Jesse was making. That's all.
All right,
which I made, by the way, to change the subject.
Yeah, you did a nice job of that. I don't know if I can, if it starts over at the beginning, then we'll skip the last answer. All right.
In the past years, I'm not going to say that we didn't think we could maybe win, but this year, like truly, I felt like we were going to win this series. Yes, we're very tight off the ice, on the ice. Everyone bought into what we were supposed to do, and I think this is the best team we've had here in a long, long time. And unfortunately, it didn't get done. But yeah, we have a great group. We really do, a very tight group, and we all want to win, and we all play for each other. So, I mean, that's what you got to ask for.
I'll tell you what.
The answer to that question did not change even a word from the same answer to the same question last year.
That's fine. Right. You know what? It did a little bit.
Not really. Not substantially. Same thing all year long.
We were a better team.
The rhetoric last year, all year long, was, and people were, and to be clear, last year people were hunting for somebody to say we don't like Pierre-Luc Dubois, we think he's a bum and he's ruined the locker room. Not true. Right. Didn't happen. Great guy. Everybody loved him. So at the end of the year, when they lost in 5 games instead of 6, the question was asked: was there anything wrong with the locker room? Was there anything wrong with the vibe, the culture, etc.? And the answer is always the same: no.
Yeah. Well, nobody's going to say
didn't get it done. That's my point, Ted. Nobody's going to say, no one's going to give you any other answer other than, yes, we all love each other, because they do.
Let me tell you something.
True,
it's
they like
all how you ask the question. Sorry. Now, I'm not saying, now I said it before, not every guy is going to give you an answer, but you will get an answer from some if you ask the question properly, and how you ask it and how you look at them. You know, there's skill to this, guys. It's not just, hey, give us 150% shit. Okay?
Oh,
that's the way it works.
You know, look,
bad word on your own show.
150%.
My pushback to that would be, is I don't know if it's. I understand the point you're making, Ted, because yes, how you ask it is important, but ultimately, you know, you're either going to get an answer like you got from Drew,
right,
that we've heard before, or you're going to have a player who decides that he wants to be a little more open and honest, like Jordan Spence, who was trying to say that he was not happy with his ice time, without fully ripping people. So,
we think that's what he was trying to say.
Pardon?
We think that's what he was trying to say.
We think that's what he was trying to say.
You think that's what he was trying to say. I don't think anything.
Okay. It's incumbent on the person you're asking the question to on how much. Look, Jim Hiller said it right at the start. What did he say about dealing with the media? I could say absolutely nothing, or I could try.
Of course, everybody can.
I understand, but the is that it's not only how you ask the question; it's how these guys decide how much they want to share with you.
It's always that way. So, I mean, you have no choice. But they might be in the worst mood in the world after a bad loss or a bad end of a season. But if you catch them in the right time and you ask in the right way, you got a shot at it, is all I'm saying. There's guarantees of nothing in anything, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But then you're just fishing with dynamite. You're just lobbing the same question into the same group of people over and over and over again.
No, it's how you ask the question. You're wrong. You're both right. I've been doing this for thousands of years, guys. You have no idea what you're talking about. None. Okay. I mean, can I tell you how many times Kobe Bryant wouldn't say a damn word to anybody, but he talked to me because how I asked the question? That's just it's called humanity.
How many of those answers wound up in Touching Greatness, available now on Amazon?
A couple.
All right.
You know what?
Who's the guy who asked him during the news conference? And wait, real quick on Kobe, okay? Who's the guy who asked him in the news conference in 2000 and I forgot what year already, 9 or whatever it was, or 10, I think it was. Kobe, you're not smiling after like 10 questions, and he's pissed off at the world, and they're up 2-0 against Detroit, and he's pissed off at home after a win. And I grabbed the mic and I said, Kobe, you're not smiling. What is your problem? Aren't you enjoying this? Job's not done. Job done? That's my stupid question. But I got an answer out of him, and now it's a meme for the rest of history. I'm not trying to do that, but I'm trying to get a response out of it.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's also not so much how you ask, but who's asking.
Of course. It's all part of the equation, but it doesn't matter if it's bad timing and what you ask, they're not going to answer anyway. You're just trying to get a decent response. That's all I'm saying. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, to be clear, I'm not picking on the media members. They're doing their job.
No, that's fine.
I'm just saying when you incentivize, when you set up a system that incentivizes certain behaviors, and then those behaviors yield unsatisfactory results year after year after year. My attitude is to say, well, let's look at the system. Right. Let's look at the system of incentives that are set up.
And the system is evolving because the internet and everything is.
It should be. I don't think it is. I think it's just we're just plugging along doing the same thing we've always ever done.
Now teams they can produce whatever they want on their own websites, and they can produce their narrative too. It doesn't matter what any of us say. They can do what they want. That's why you have a job.
Yes.
That's exactly why you have a job.
But
30 years ago,
you're not wrong. But so yes, you're right. But here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about.
Okay.
How do I want to say this? If you make people talk to the media, you can
hey, you have to talk to the media now, guys.
They do. I mean, I forget the football player who said, I'm only here not to get fined. And then that was his answer.
It's in their damn contracts. They ought to appreciate it.
Well, okay, Nate. We're promoting them. Season 2.
That's where it's different now than it used to be, right?
All right.
Now they can promote themselves.
But the point is, if you force people to talk to the media, and to be perfectly clear, they do, then if you are the organization who wants to defend against the potential of your employees saying something that you would prefer they didn't, the only thing you can do is guide them on specifics of what not to say. You can say, don't say this, don't say that, or you can give them one specific thing to say. Don't say you don't like the color red. You can say you like the color yellow, but for God's sake, don't say you like the color red. And we encourage you to say, no, hold on. Let me finish my thought.
Guys, I got to take a time out for a second. I'll be right back.
All right. Nice but there's too many colors for you to anticipate what they might say. And you might not realize that they're going to go on an unbelievable tangent on the color salmon because as far as everybody else is concerned, salmon is red, and so who cares? But you told them don't say red, so they won't say the color red. But then you get a 45-minute diatribe about the benefits of the color salmon.
Perfect example of what I brought up. The first words out of my mouth that started this whole conversation: media training. Nobody has media training. That's if you don't. Don't give me that. Well, if you don't have it, you don't know how to deal with it.
But you have to be receptive to the training. You could give me marathon training. I ain't gonna go run a marathon.
No, but you know what? If you're not receptive to the training, you're an idiot. You're a fool because this is your career.
Well, your words, not mine.
I'll say it. You want me to say it louder? You're a fool.
I heard you.
if you don't accept the fact, this is what you do for a living.
I want to spend the time that John has gone speculating about where he went. I think he's in the bathroom.
I actually don't want to know where he went.
No, all right, fair enough.
He's probably making a call and making a bet, actually.
Yeah. Well.
Anyway, the bottom line is if you don't have media training, you're just shooting out of your mouth. You have no idea. You're just sort of ad-libbing your life. And that's the truth. Whether you like it or not, or you don't care, or it doesn't matter. It's part of your job as a professional athlete to deal with the media. And if you don't know how to deal with them and you look like a fool when you talk to them and you got to tell them how to respond, that's your fault.
Well, part of this is also, and this is a whole other conversation.
Yes, it is.
If a player for the Lakers has a bad media availability after they lose in the first round.
Yep.
Versus a player on the Charlotte Bobcats, are they now? I believe
Hornets.
Apologies, NBA fans. I don't know the names of the teams as well as I should. But the point is, the Memphis Grizzlies or whatever, the Orlando Magic,
any team,
it's not received the same way. So at some level, you can, if there are certain franchises in different leagues who can simply shrug their shoulders and say, well, so what?
Well, that's their prerogative.
And yes, people will be upset and yes, people will be mad. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be, they're not going to talk about it for an hour on.
No, I mean, none of it's the end of the world. It's a stupid quote. It's all it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and if it goes viral, it'll go viral for 10 minutes and then it's mostly forgotten unless it's something outrageous. So it doesn't really matter. But the bottom line is it matters to me. The second I'm asking that question, I'm asking it for a reason because I want to use your response. I'm trying to get you to say something that you don't want to say. I'm trying to get you to say something.
Sure.
Something.
Yes, but that's your approach.
Yeah, and it's worked for 40 plus years. A lot of people, they'll just ask generic questions and they wonder why, hey, I didn't get much of a response. No, because you asked it like nobody cared.
Well, just like Scotty Bowman is the greatest coach in the NHL history and as the only one to have won a cup with 3 teams, apparently you are the Scotty Bowman of quote hunting.
No, I'm not the Scotty
Bowman. We all can't be as good as you are.
I'm not saying that I'm great. I'm just saying there's a way of doing this.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have not even been trained to do this. Okay? Literally. I mean, you said it. How many people in the room? And I'm not ripping anyone individually. It doesn't even matter. But if you're a general doctor, you don't know how to do brain surgery. Okay? You're both
fair,
doctors.
but if somebody ran up to me on the street, handed me $10,000 and a scalpel and said, somebody in this building right here needs brain surgery and I need you to try and do it. Well, I'll give it a shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, what do you care if you kill somebody?
You paid me to do it. Well, or not paid, but you know what I mean? Like if there's an opportunity to try it,
yes.
Which again is part of my issue with the system. We force them to talk to the media and then
I get it.
Anyway, whatever.
Oh, John's back.
Oh,
yeah. John, I didn't see you there. Sorry.
Where'd you go, John? We talked about you while you were gone.
We talked about you. We said where you went.
Yeah.
Did you make a play or something while we were?
I made a lot of plays. I have to bug out in like 7 minutes.
All right. Okay, well, I wasted enough time, so let's get to Ted.
Stop talking.
All right.
Jesse, all right. I'm going to play Luke. Right. Here's Luke.
Rob Blake has more integrity than anyone I've ever known. I don't think people realize the countless hours that go behind the scene, the sleepless night. So on behalf of all of us at the organization, on the Kings and our ownership group, I want to thank Rob Blake. for what he's done. He's left us with a damn good team, and he left this franchise in great shape. And we're very fortunate to have had a human being doing this for us. Now, as we move forward, a mistake will happen. That's life. It's what we do from it and what we learn, and hopefully this will help us get us to the next level, which is greatness and the Stanley Cup.
What do you say to those who kind of look at the way that the Kings play and think of it more as like a kind of an antiquated system? And maybe is that something maybe you're looking for, or those that would want something as more of a progressive style, maybe more offensive driven?
I don't know. We had three of the best lines in hockey. We scored goals. We had a 40% power play. We said, we needed to tweak our power play. Got to give credits to our guys. They figured it out. Some teams have a 60-goal score. We don't, but we have a lot of guys that can score goals. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have more guys with 40 points than anyone in the league. We play hard. We forecheck. We don't sit back. Like the whole thing about sitting back in the third period. No coach has ever said to a team, okay, let's sit back. We're going to win this one. It's never been in the history of the game. It's human nature. You go back and watch the tape in Game 6 where Edmonton was sitting. I was shocked when I saw Connor McDavid dump it in and change. I'm like, what? But it's just the way it is. And we've seen it throughout the playoffs. But it's definitely something we have to learn from it. It can't happen again, but we want to push. In Game 2, we were at home and they started pushing, and we got 2 or 3 2-on-1s. We scored. I think it was Game 3. The puck was at blue line 2 or 3 times. It didn't come out. If we would have gotten 1 or 2 2-on-1s and then we scored probably over, it wasn't. That happens, but we got to learn from that. But I don't think our style of play is something that sitting back so far. This year with Jimmy Cummins starting last year, we've really been rolling our guys, and there's been a lot of freedom on the ice.
There you go. So that's Luc Robitaille. Again, I thought he was very candid, as much as he could be, throughout most of it. And I liked his attitude. It's like, okay, we're living up to what we did. What do you think?
What?
Yeah, both of you.
I mean, look, I think that I agree with many of the things that Luke said, but the bottom line is that at the end of the day, they just didn't trust enough players to help them win this series. And that's it for me. You can't,
right.
That's it. They just didn't trust enough players. So they're not, what was this? I don't want to throw anyone, I'm not going to mention names, but there was a great line. We're closer to the playoffs and further away from the cup.
Right.
And I still think that that's where they are right now.
Okay.
I want to know what the next question was.
I have no idea.
The reason I say that is that
because
the question,
I cut this out for our show, so I'm as bad as everybody else.
But I'm going to keep harping on my point. The reason I want to know is that the question, I believe, and apologies to Russell Morgan if I am putting words in his mouth.
No, you're not.
He's the one who asked the question in that.
Right.
The question was, the hockey world, fans, broadcasters, executives, players, broadcasters for other teams, all seem to agree that this was a series that the Kings lost by misplaying their strengths. Right. This was a self-inflicted loss. And that we've heard internally those sentiments shared as well. So the question essentially being asked when he said, do you want to get a more progressive offensive style, whatever, et cetera. What's really being asked is, why'd you do that?
Yeah.
Did you do something wrong? And if so, what you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And the answer was a mishmash of, well, I know what you're asking without explicitly saying, I know what you're asking, right? The whole thing about, no coach ever told the team to sit back in the third period. Well, that was never explicitly addressed in the question, but we all understand that's what's being asked and answered, even though the answer didn't say you asked this, we're just throwing it out there.
Right.
So everybody understands the subtext of the conversation. And there could have been follow-ups about the answer given that would have added some more context and nuance to the answer and perhaps given us more of an insight into the thought process behind what happened.
Yeah,
but
if you're in a round table discussion.
Instead, what happened, I suspect, is that somebody asked a question about, something else, and we just sort of moved on.
Yeah.
And then what we're left with is a really surface level look at, like, do you think you did something wrong? No. It happens, which is the same version of the same conversation had with essentially every pair of players we were given. Was there was some sort of very rough surface glaze given to, did anything go wrong? Nope. And then when you talk to Jim Hiller, you get, this is how I do things. I do things the way I do it, right or wrong. And then for the next 5 months, we're all sort of left with the same conversation existing in an agitated state, which at the end of the day is not a big deal. That's what we covered, John, while you were gone, is that at the end of the day, none of this matters. It's just a hockey team in LA.
Exactly. So, and John's yawning over there, which is that
well, he's also got to go in 5 minutes. So I'm trying to talk faster than I usually do. But that's my point, is that it was a question that was asking it was asking a very obvious question, but phrased in a very polite,
but it's always
professional way.
Right. Because if you phrase it, hey, what the hell happened? And what are you going to do about it? They'll look at you like, hey, that's being a little negative, isn't it?
But you asked Kobe Bryant, but you just lauded yourself for asking Kobe Bryant a very blunt question, which is, you're not smiling. What's wrong with you?
How you say it.
All right. Anyway, the point is, I want to know what the next question is. John,
I'm not lauding myself.
I don't want to keep John here longer than he's got to.
Yeah, I know. Again,
John, you got a job to do, John.
Oh, okay. All right. Quickly.
Give us we're trying to make a living here.
All right. Best bet for tonight. We're just going to go with the first period over in the Vegas Edmonton game. Vegas has played 7 games this year. All of them have had 2 or more goals in the first period in the playoffs. Okay. So that's the one play for tonight.
Okay. You don't have 2 in it, huh?
Don't have 2. I'm just going to go with 1. Like, why force it?
Wow, I love the confidence. Are you on the phone with your man yet, Jesse?
No, I'm sorry. I'm looking for medical updates on my phone. I've been getting test results all day long, and it's the same test, and it keeps telling me the same thing, but the notification keeps going off. There.
Okay. Always something.
All right,
guys. How do we end the show here? Besides goodbye.
So long.
Bye.
Nice seeing you. It's great.
Yeah.
And by the way, you do look healthy.
Thank you.
And that means you got to be feeling decent.
Yeah, I do. All things considered, I feel pretty good.
I want to know that.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's important. How well liked he is, despite the way he chirps at me.
If I didn't think you could handle it, I wouldn't do it.
I know. I appreciate it. It's great to have you on. Really.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Now I got to go call Eric Stevens and apologize to him.
Yeah.
All right. That's the Home Ice Advantage. Like it or not, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.